Hey, what's up, YouTube? So, I am also trying to get a podcast. If you want to see what it looks like for me to try and record one of these things, well, this is what I'm doing. I'm also going to try and go live on Twitter at the same time. So, bear with me for just a minute here while I try and figure out how to, um, well, get them up on my phone real quick. Hang on. Da-da-da-da. What's up, Twitter? How you doing? I am doing something a little different today. I'm recording the first ever episode of a podcast that I wanted to get started for a long time. It's part of a project that I've been working on for a while now called the Intentional Academy. And so I'm streaming here, I'm streaming by iHeartRadio, whatever those different services are that we can get this thing out there. So in the meanwhile, thank you for coming to hang out with me. And yeah, let me just get a couple of things set up here and I will start chit chatting at you in just a minute. What's up? How you doing? Hey, thanks for tuning in. This is cool. I like when people come to hang out with me. Social distance this, yo. Ba-ba-ba-bum-ba-bum-bum. All right, well, let's hit the record button here. Yep, seeing some waveforms. All right, so here we go. This is the first time I'm going to try doing this, and I'm pretty excited about it, not going to lie. Hmm. Finding time for what matters most, launching your dream career, and building a prosperous future, then you should visit us at intentionalacademy.com. I'm your host, Tony Ferrar, and I am thrilled that you're tuning in today. This is the first ever episode of the Intentional Academy podcast. It's been a dream and a goal, and that's got us all working from home. You're likely to hear my family in the background. I'm not using the recording technology that I originally hoped to. But I also know that getting this message out is way more important than things like audio quality. So bear with me and enjoy this inspiration as a distraction, I hope, from watching the latest headlines. Here's what you can expect today: 3 stories of times that I hit rock bottom, 3 times that I found myself facing a wake up call, 3 times that I had to make a change or lose everything that really mattered. It starts in grad school on the way, no income and no health insurance. I had to rethink everything I knew about my career and about my dreams. Don't worry, that's not where these stories end, or this would be the worst show ever. I'll also share how I turned things around, how I went from working 14-hour days to being fulfilling life, and how I landed my dream job when all the odds seemed to be stacked against me. As you listen, I hope you'll realize the truth. This actually isn't a show about me. It's a show about you. Well, you and me. See, we all struggle with time and money. As I went through these transformation experiences along my own journey, show about us, you and me. See, we all struggle with time and money and career. We all find ourselves waking up to the realization that we're not where we want to be, and we all look to transform during difficult times in our lives. As I went through these transformation experiences along my own journey, that life I wanted most, but always struggled to grasp. Wow, that's hard to say. That life I wanted most to create the Intentional Academy to teach you how to make time for what matters most, launch passionate careers, and build purposeful prosperity. I have to give you a disclaimer though. If you continue listening to this episode, you're going to face a challenge. You're going to see time for a someday that never comes. You're going to find yourself confronted with a decision: change or continue doing more of the same. Build the life you want most, or let the days continue to drift by on a journey to nowhere. But before we get to that, I'd like you to know that this episode is sponsored by our free Intentional Academy community. You don't have to figure this out on your own. You might be at a low point like I was, or you might just have a feeling that there is more to life than what you're currently experiencing. We spend your life doing things you'll look back on and be glad that you did. The big thing that many of us is missing is support. You might have plenty of folks who give you encouragement or advice or offer reassurance, but do you have anyone to talk to who's working on the same kind of growth as you? If not, it can be really lonely, and I don't want that for you, which is why I'm inviting you to join us in the free Intentional Academy community. We use a free messaging platform that runs on mobile and web and desktop apps, and we've got a number of channels in the community so that you can participate in the daily discussions that are most helpful for you. If you'd like to join, visit intentionalacademy.com/community and enter your name and email address in the form. We'll send you our community guidelines along with a invitation link to join the community, an invitation to be connected to a community of people like us doing things like this. Intentionalacademy.com/community is where you should go to sign up and take the first step to making what you learned today in this episode matter. So visit intentionalacademy.com/community to join the free community and start regaining control of your time, your money, and your career. Intentionalacademy.com/community. All right, now on to the stories. I think everyone bottoms out at some point in their lives. Some of us do it once. For me, I decided to do it 3 different times. So I graduated college for the first time in 2008. Undergrad was an absolute blast, especially the last 2 years of it. I spent most of my time with my best friend Justin and my girlfriend Nicole. We had a great group of friends. We hosted parties. We took trips to Florida for spring break, screamed our lungs out at football games, go Hokies, had margaritas with lunch after class, sometimes concerts. The point here is we played a lot, we squeezed in time for homework, and actually managed to live a pretty balanced life. Schoolwork got done, A's and B's, and we still had a lot of fun. Just after graduation, just after graduation, Nicole and I spent the summer of 2008 backpacking through Europe. We rode trains, we stayed in hostels, we ate delicious food. We saw some amazing sights. We got lost in some places we didn't speak the language, and mostly we just had a really great time together. We were on top of the world when we finally returned to college in August, and we were on top of the world when we finally returned to college in August. She had a couple of years left on her communications degree, and I was getting ready to start my master's. So, a little context, if you're fortunate enough to land a funded position as a grad student, the school will actually cover your tuition and then even pay you a small salary. The price that you pay is in time spent teaching or time spent doing research. They recognize this by counting 3 classes as a full load. My advisor warned me that every grad student makes the mistake of simultaneously taking 3 classes, self confronting my first major research deadline. In just 1 month, we would be attending a conference where we had to show our sponsor what it is we'd been doing with their money for the last few years. I was new to the project, but I joined in what I hoped would be the middle and not the end. The stakes were really high. Finishing building this experimental jet engine rig, adding all the instrumentation, and then we had to collect meaningful data in the next month that proved we were on our way to a major discovery, or lose my funding next month and figure out how to pay for grad school on my own. I threw myself at the work, self that this was just a short-term problem, a phase. If I just got past this one thing, I'd be funded all the way through the end of my master's and wouldn't have to worry again for one of them. In case you're wondering, that instantly doomed me to take longer than the typical 2 years to earn my master's. In fact, it took me 3. But I also laid the foundation for a really unhealthy approach to work and life. I told myself the on me because I was so busy. I taught myself that the best way to get things done was to work crazy hours, pull all-nighters, sacrifice my weekends. And Nicole sitting in the living room. Ever been in a situation like this? Things are so tense that the air seems thick. The hair on your arms stands up. You get this knot in your stomach, your ears, they start ringing a little bit. I remember feeling an almost out of body experience, like I was watching a movie, but it wasn't really me. I was surprised that she was up. I don't remember what time it was, but I know it was late. For longer than I can remember, I'd been waking up before she did, leaving for work. I'd send a few text messages to check in throughout the day and then come home after she'd already gone to bed. I remember 2 things vividly from that conversation. This was the first time we'd seen each other awake and face to face in about a month. The second was the ultimatum. Either my work hours would change or my relationship status would. My stomach dropped. Actually, I felt like the floor had fallen away beneath my feet and I was careening down into some pit. See, I left out a really important detail. The biggest reason I younger than I am, uh, we figured that I would be completing my master's at the same time that she'd be graduating with her undergrad, and we really wanted to stay together. Audio dropped there. Try that one more time. We figured that I'd be completing my master's at the same time as she'd be finishing her undergrad, and we wanted to stay together. So, when I found myself in the conversation I was having with her ready to leave, felt like I'd been punched in the gut. How had it come to this? How had I gotten so far from the good old days of video games and margaritas? How had I walked away from all the fun, leaving her behind with one more "I'll be home soon" text after another? So, one thing you should know about me is I'm actually really good at commitment. Once I decide to do something, I create a system and I do it. And I'm really glad for that because I am sure it saved our relationship. Excuse me. Nicole and I have been married now for almost 9 years. Our third child's on the way. But we were a breath away. I made a commitment to her. I would be home. I would be home by dinner during the week and I would spend my evenings with her. I wouldn't work weekends anymore. In other words, I would commit to getting my schoolwork and my research work done during normal work week. To make this work, I went out and I got every book on time management that I could get my hands on. We agreed that I would spend one more weekend working to put a system to. The only problem was no one writes books for college students on how to manage their time. The most popular books are written for professionals who are at a very different place in their lives. So I ended up having to create my own system that was built on the principles that I learned in these, constantly disengaged from my relationships, to coming home every day for dinner, relaxing during the weekend, and rebuilding a balanced life. The funny thing is, I actually found myself being more productive. I got more done in far less time. And I think maybe that the details of how I did that are better saved for another conversation. But a big part of it was that I used to waste a lot of time at work, an hour. I let myself get sucked into projects that weren't relevant to my goals, or, well, really anyone's for that matter. I'd be a perfectionist and I'd obsess over things like an email to my boss, spending my precious time editing an email instead of getting meaningful work done. When my attitude shifted and I figured out how to move on, I got far more done after I stopped working those crazy hours and I finished grad school in style. Did I still have big deadlines and a long day here or a weekend there? Yeah, sure. But they became the exception and not the rule. I have never. All right, so now it's time to fast forward a few years. Well, 7 if you want to start counting from when I finished my undergrad. I graduated for the last time in 2015 with my PhD. And somewhere along the way, what happened was we realized that my dream was to become a professor and that master's degree wasn't going to cut it. So Nicole and I got married. We committed to a few more years of school while I earned the credentials for that dream job. And really, the work life balance of being a professor can be pretty awesome if you're intentional. So 2015, having just spent 12 years in college, we moved to Florida for my postdoc, which that's like an internship for somebody who's looking to become a professor. In October of that year, a really funny thing happened. For the first time in my life at age 30, I managed to make it 6 months without a grace period. Remember how I described that gun? Remember how I described that gut punch feeling a little bit earlier? My student loan bill, the first one that ever showed up, that was gut punch number 2. Hey, everybody. The thing I neglected to mention about grad school is that after my productivity increased, so did my paycheck. I actually got promoted into this position called lab manager, and I started coordinating the efforts of 10 grad students. I had a dozen undergrad researchers working for me, and I even taught some classes at Virginia Tech in the engineering school. I actually managed to double my salary as a grad student. And while that wasn't luxurious, it combined with Nicole's full time income to give us the ability to live pretty comfy. I managed to graduate having built $95,000 worth of debt. When I graduated, Nicole and I had a brand new car. We moved to a bigger townhouse because we grew tired of the student apartments near campus. We financed a TV, couches, a dining room set, queen size bedroom suite, the delivery charges that went with them. Everything a broke grad student in denial needs to fake it like he's already made it. When I graduated, we put the $7,000 bill of moving that houseload of stuff from Virginia down to Florida on a credit card. Found ourselves forced to rent a 3-bedroom apartment in Florida, even though we lived, well, a little less than inspiring. What happened to that good life everybody kept promising when I graduated? We'd spent years watching our friends earn real incomes while we lived on a grad school stipend. Now that it was supposed to be fun and cash in on all that hard work and sacrifice, all we could do was afford rice, beans, and peanut butter sandwiches. It started with a few difficult conversations, which that's kind of a nice way of saying Nicole and I were both freaking out and trying to figure out what it is we'd do next. She'd always been a bit wiser than me. This is really no exception. She remained calm and thought things through. I leapt into action without really considering what the plan should be. I started hunting for zero interest promotional credit cards to transfer our balances to. I started looking into loan consolidation. And then I did something a married person should never do. I made a big financial decision without speaking to my partner. I signed up for a few of those credit cards. I transferred the balance from other cards over there to try and drop the interest rate. I figured that if we could make that payment a little bit smaller, maybe this wouldn't be as painful. So, proud of my accomplishment, I showed her what I'd done. Let's just say she was less than thrilled. And rightfully so. Not only had I made a significant, after a very difficult conversation, we realized that it was time to make an intelligent plan together. So we bought some books, we listened to some podcasts, and we came up with a drastic plan. We decided that we would live on as little as possible and throw every penny we could at that. Pay it off, get it out of our lives as fast as possible. No more balancing payments, no more promising our future to pay for the past. We started with a few $1,000s in savings and $95,000 in debt. The first thing we realized was that having a savings account with money in it while we were paying interest on debt was kind of like borrowing the money twice. Every penny that was sitting in that account cost the interest rate of our debt. So, in a drastic and terrifying first move, we emptied that account down to a $1,000 emergency fund. So, in a drastic first move, we emptied that account down into a $1,000 emergency fund and we wrote the first big check towards our debt. Now it felt real. We had $1,000 to our name and $95,000 worth of debt to dig out of. 1 month at a time, we ate the peanut butter and we sent the check. We downgraded our apartment. We lived farther away from work to save money. We traded the brand new car for a 10-year-old used one. 32 frugal months later, we paid that last bill and have not borrowed a dollar since. Let me tell you, having the money that we used to send to student loans available to decide what we want to do with every month, that is a great feeling. Y'all, that we still had a lot of fun during this time. We took trips. We explored our hobbies. We still made it out for dates. We went to the restaurants and the movies. We bought some toys. How we did this, again, probably better left for another episode. But right now, you should know that for us, the transformation of going through this debt journey was more important than the numbers. We learned how to place value on things that matter most. Money does not buy happiness, but it's a great life, and we have never felt more freedom to enjoy what this world has to offer. All right, how about one more story to wrap this up? It's about the third time in my adult life that I felt like I'd hit rock bottom. You already heard about how I messed up with my time and my money. This one is about the moment my career went off the rails. It all started back in 2015 as I finished my PhD. Remember, my goal in getting that PhD was to become a professor. That was what I dreamed of. That was what I was certain would be the best ways, not universities, companies looking to hire technical experts to come do engineering for them. Why would I do that? Was a lack of confidence. Despite my credentials, I knew that the path to becoming a full-time member of the faculty is not easy. Be there. The most common question they asked me was, why isn't your GPA on your resume? Are you kidding me? I started to think they might be unaware of the fact that anything below a B is considered a failing grade in grad school. Everybody who finishes a PhD has a great GPA. Looking back, I realized there were two problems with the career fair. The first was the folks who attended weren't really looking to hire PhDs, so they didn't know what to do with me. The second was I didn't want a single one of those jobs, and I think they knew it before I did. So I regrouped. I talked with my mentors about what steps should be taken if I truly did want to become a professor. With their guidance, I secured a professor at the university. But I want to make sure you hear that right. After 12 years of college and 3 degrees, I finally graduated. Instead of getting that cushy job that everybody else talks about, I got an internship. It paid better than being a grad student, but not by much. So next thing I did was developed a 2-year plan to perform research, build my resume, and search for faculty positions. That's the typical time people spend at a postdoc, 2 years. You're supposed to start some new research, get some results, publish them during the first year, and then spend the second year hunting for that faculty job. That's what took us to Florida to kick off that debt-free journey that I shared a few minutes ago, by the way. So fast forward a year. My boss calls me into an office on an April morning. She hands me an envelope and she struggles to make eye contact. For the third time, I found myself in that foggy room and I knew something big, something wrong was happening. This time it wasn't an ultimatum from my spouse. Unfortunately, just 1 year into working there, the funding for my job dried up and I was laid off. She did everything she could to save it, but there was nothing to be done. There was simply no funding to pay my salary. So imagine this moment. Just weeks after learning that my health benefits, we had no money. We were also a year into that debt-free journey, so we'd been sending every penny we could get our hands on towards my student loans. I will never forget the feeling of dread that I had on that bus ride home. 12 years of college, 1 year of an internship, unemployed. To make matters worse, the hiring cycle for universities is rigid. You're supposed to apply for positions in the fall. You complete the hiring process in the spring. You begin work the following fall. I lost my job in the spring, which means there were virtually zero faculty jobs open. So I went into full freak out mode and I applied to 100 jobs, mostly engineering jobs in industry. I felt like I was back at that career fair, watching my dreams of becoming a professor evaporate. I spent days tweaking my resume, customizing the cover letters. I made it a full-time job to apply for jobs and spending weeks and weeks and weeks typing my information into box after box after box and application after application. Applications, I got 0 phone calls. You heard that right. 0. It makes sense looking back because I knew I didn't want these jobs, but I had to do something. I had just a few short months before my son would be born. I'll never forget the roller coaster experience of applying to jobs. After years of building my credentials, I was stuck applying to jobs I didn't want, mostly in places I didn't want to live, trying my best to stay positive, but it wasn't easy. I can still remember the feeling of finding a job posting that sounded promising. I'd read the description, start to get excited, picturing myself doing the work and maybe even enjoying it. I'd read on as the postage shifted from specific job description to company values and culture, and I started thinking, wow, this place actually sounds kind of cool. I was trying to make the most of the situation. Hiding at the bottom of the page would be this list of required qualifications. I don't know why they put it at the bottom. We get our hopes up, we got to read on, and then you find out. I don't know. I'd read each, nervous that I'd find something that would disqualify me, but I'd find nothing missing. My excitement would peak, and I'd click the Apply Now button. Next, I'd be asked to create an account and then transcribe my resume line by line into their text boxes. There'd always be some question I didn't have the answer to. Before that, I'd have to take a little while to hunt down and find what the heck is my high school street address, anyhow. The last thing they'd ask for is for you to upload the PDF, move on. Eventually, I'd reach the end of the application, check the little box pledging to be honest, and press submit with some more excited knots in my stomach. I hope they pick me. I'd really like to work there. I wonder how long it'll take to hear something. I'd instantly open my email and there would be some automated confirmation. Great, they got it. Oh shoot, did I misspell something? Yeah, no, too late now. I'd spend the next hour glued to my email, pressing refresh a dozen times, even though it automatically updates. The next few weeks were torture. I'd stare at my email inbox, answer the phone anytime a strange number would call, only to discover it was some robot thinking the fact silence. One day turned into two, then became a week, then another week. Silence, nothing, no response at all. I try and find an email or a phone number to follow up with. Nothing. Slowly, my enthusiasm faded, and I'd repeat this dance 100 times, each with the same long, silent rejection at the end. It was in this moment that I started to think there might be something wrong with the process. Master's PhD. I worked at Technologies Research Center, U.S. Air Force. I held the title of lab manager. I coordinated the research efforts of 10 grad students working with jet engines. I negotiated research contracts. I landed the largest dollar value contract that had ever come into our lab. I authored 17 papers. I presented in a dozen international conferences. I won a Best Paper award nationally, and I had 2 patents in the process. To top it all off, I taught engineering courses at Virginia. Received a single phone call. Nothing. With a kid on the way, a mountain of student loans, and no idea where we'd be living next month, these were some of the truth. If a computer algorithm is judging me before a person even sees my resume, I've lost. So what did I do? I got myself a stack of books and I started listening to podcasts, and I tried to find a different approach. Are you noticing a trend yet? Maybe it's the academic in me. I quickly discovered that no one was writing books for people like me, people like you and me, people like us. 25 more jobs, and I actually got 26 interviews. You heard that right. After one of the interviews, the person actually called a buddy at a different school, and yet I went from 100 applications and 0 phone calls to 25 applications and 26 phone calls. Details best saved for another episode or maybe several, but it all came down to 2 things: clarifying my dream, connecting to people. Hack what it is I just shared with you. Rock bottom. 3 times in my life, I felt like I was hitting rock bottom. The first was my wake up call to start spending my precious time with intention. The second was when I realized that my personal finances were wrecked. And the third was realizing that a career is a lot more than a paycheck. These all wrap up into a single concept that I believe is really important: living on purpose. See, I wasn't self sabotaging intentionally. I was just going with the flow, doing what I saw everyone else doing. Working long hours is just what you do when you're in grad school. Everybody has student loans, everybody borrows money to buy a car. Nobody really likes their jobs. They just take one that pays well and is tolerable. The folks around me and those who came before, they sent this message, but they were wrong. As I awakened from the fog and started transforming my life in response to each of these crises, the people around me noticed. It started with my fellow grad students in the lab, and then the undergrads that I managed for research, and the people I taught in class. Before long, I found myself being asked, even by senior colleagues, "How are you doing this?" Tells us what the normal path is. We all follow it because we've never been able to imagine doing anything else. One by one, the people who asked, "How are you doing this?" started asking, "Could I do it too?" One by one, I shared my story. One by one, I shared my approach. So, you're still here? What that tells me is that you're looking for a way to expand a jar, and you put the lid on, they'll start jumping and hitting their heads on the inside of the lid. You leave them in there long enough, and they'll get tired of bumping their heads, and they'll start jumping just a little shorter. If you wait a little longer, you can actually take the lid off that jar, and not a single flea will jump out. They'll hop around just millimeters away from freedom. They've learned a new limit on what they think is possible, and they will die in that jar, even though they have everything they need within them to jump to freedom. I don't know if this is true or if it's just a great parable. Honestly, it doesn't matter. The point is, we've all been bumping our heads on the inside of the lid for a while now. We've learned not to aim quite as high to avoid. I'm not even sure there's a jar. This world is an amazing place to be. And waking up to realize that you don't have to go with the flow, that you don't have to join those around you. So, welcome, my friend. It is time to face that call that I warned you about at the beginning of this episode. It is time to decide whether you're going to change or journey to nowhere. I hope you'll stick with us. Hit the subscribe button, leave a comment, visit intentionalacademy.com/community and fill out the form to become one of us. You're only alone in this if you choose to be. intentionalacademy.com/community. We're waiting for you. And we'll be back next week to talk about what it really looks like to spend your time. Hang on. Check. Back. Cool. Sorry about that. That's it. The first ever Intentional Academy podcast episode. Thank you for being here. Launching this benefit from it as well. Please consider sharing this episode with a few people who matter to you, a few people who you would like to see succeed. Yeah, I really don't know what else to say. Thanks for being here. This is a lot of fun. If you missed some of it, if you want to see the rest, I'm pretty sure these recordings are going to stay live on YouTube and on Twitter. But beyond that, check me out real soon. This about it, you can head over to intentionalacademy.com/podcast. Honestly, just go to intentionalacademy.com and read all this stuff. There's like 3 pages. Go check it out, and we will see you real soon. So until next time, have a great day, Twitter. Thanks so much for being here. And have a great day, YouTube. I really appreciate you. 2 of you seem to have said with me from the beginning of this episode. That's just so cool. Y'all rock. See you soon.